Hey everyone, how's it going? Coming to you with another knife comparison. This time it's on the Sencut Scepter versus the Civivi Elementum. Now, I want to go ahead and just state that I'm going to run this comparison more or less like I'm comparing the base version of the Sencut Scepter versus the base version of the Civivi Elementum. This is, of course, the Damascus and carbon fiber version, the much more expensive version of the Elementum. However, the overall knife is, in terms of design, is exactly the same. It's just the materials that are a little different. So I'm going to talk about both the more expensive version of the Elementum and the more affordable version when running through this comparison. So let's start with the Sencut Scepter. Features a 3-inch 9CR 18MOV drop point blade that has a very high flat grind, is deployed via your choice of thumb studs or flipper tang, and has a beautiful stone-washed finish. Meanwhile, the Civivi Elementum, in its base form, has a 2.96-inch D2 blade that is a drop point with a very high hollow grind, deploying via a flipper. Now, this version here is the Damascus version, which I personally prefer over D2, as I'm not a big fan of D2, mostly due to rust reasons, and this is a stainless Damascus. If we're going to compare this against D2 from Civivi, it's definitely going to be a clear winner for Civivi in terms of edge holding. While 9CR18 MOV is a pretty adequate steel, I actually like it a lot as an everyday carry steel because it's the Chinese equivalent of 440B. Many people mix that up. They hear 9CR18 MOV and think it's Chinese 440C, and it's a very honest mix-up because the Chinese equivalent to 440C is called 9CR18MO. Okay, no V. So you can see how they get the mistake, but this is actually closer in makeup to 440B, which means it has excellent rust resistance, pretty decent edge retention, and sharpens extremely readily. Meanwhile, D2 is going to have far better edge holding, but it's going to have worse rust resistance, and it's going to take a little bit longer to put an edge on. Now, compared to this Damascus version, the stainless Damascus version, which is made out of essentially Chinese 440... I believe it's 9CR18 MOV, so Chinese 440B and Chinese VG10, which there's two versions of. You have CR10 and you have a 10CR variation. Either way, in direct comparison, and I did compare these two versions directly in my testing, this held a better edge. So no matter which way you slice it, pun intended, the Elementum is going to have better edge retention than the Sencut. Now that said, I noticed that in terms of pure slicing capability, the Sencut actually did a little bit better. Now, that could be because this is a matte finish blade and this is a highly polished blade on mine. Maybe it's different with the standard D2 version, but I did notice this had slightly better cutting performance when going through cardboard than the Elementum. This did well, this did great. So, like many comparisons, it really is a pick your poison type of situation. One thing I do want to say in terms of deployment on the Sencut is while the thumb studs are outstanding, the flipper is very small, and while it is jimped so you can get good traction on there, it is a very small flipper tab. If I bring in the Elementum by comparison, you can see the size of the flipper tabs directly compared to each other, and it really is night and day. The Civivi is just so much easier to get a grip on using the flipper tab. Which leads us into deployment and lockup, in which case the Sencut comes out lightning fast with the thumb studs and adequately fast with the flipper tab. It locks up super tight, there's no blade play, and we could easily adjust the pivot if it ever developed any. And it comes out very smooth. This is on bearings, and it is just a very smooth knife. And actually, it's smoother than my Elementum. The Elementum also riding on ball bearings in that pivot point there, also a flipper tab design, and it is smooth, but there's just a little bit of grit. Let's see if I can get you to hear it. Probably not. You can't hear it, but I can sure feel it. There's a little bit of resistance somewhere around this section of the knife. Versus with the Sencut, smooth sailing all around. Now, I could just drop a few drops of Tough Glide or similar lubricant in that pivot point, but I wanted to kind of show this to illustrate the fact that even though this is a more expensive knife, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better in every regard. So, in terms of how smooth it is, the Sencut actually wins. Now, the Elementum, we got a misdeploy there, comes out pretty quick, locks up super solid, and again, we can adjust the pivot point if we ever need to. Just one side on this case, versus with the Sencut where it's actually a double-sided pivot point. Perhaps that's a pro in your mind for the Sencut, perhaps it's a flaw. So, handles. On the Sencut, we are looking at a 3.9-inch handle made out of your choice of either micarta or G10. I went with micarta because I love micarta handles. I always said it was my favorite handle material. These days, it's really contested with aluminum-handled knives. I still think I prefer micarta by just a little bit, though, and I certainly prefer it over G10. Very nice texture on here, and you can get it in a wide variety of colors in either material. The Elementum also comes in your choice of either micarta or G10 for the standard D2 version of the blade, or you can get different carbon fiber styles for the Damascus versions. This particular polished Damascus version has this carbon fiber G10 layered handle material, which is very slick. And then you have some shredded carbon fiber options for the non-polished Damascus version of the knife. Length on it is 4 inches, by the way. And in terms of ergonomics, it's actually interesting because we can see just how much wider the Elementum's handle design is. It's definitely a little bit broader, while this has a more narrow, sleek handle. And they are both comfortable in hand, but as I mentioned in my reviews on both, I get hot spots from these loop-over clips, and they just bite into the fat of my palm when I'm squeezing down on these knives. And I have that issue with both of them. That said, comparing them directly side by side right now, they're about the same, if I'm being completely honest. Maybe slightly more hot spots on the Elementum, thanks to the steel liners that run proud of the handle scales, but it's honestly very, very, very close. So I'm not actually going to say that either one is more ergonomic. They both suffer from the same hotspot issues, but neither are terrible either, if I'm being completely honest. And, maybe you don't have those issues with your knives. Maybe they don't cause hotspots, but for me, they both tend to give me a little bit of a problem. If I took those clips off, sure, we wouldn't have that, but then I'm just dropping the knife in my pocket, and that's just not a thing I want to do. Lanyard holes on both, as I mentioned before in my review of this, kind of funny. They didn't punch out that micarta on this side of the lanyard hole properly, so I still have a bit of micarta just filling that up. I could easily just knock that out with a pin, but I haven't done it yet, because I kind of think it's funny. But if we compare it to the lanyard hole on the Civivi, they're pretty close in size. I'm willing to bet, though, thanks to the ovangular nature of this, it'd be easier to get some thicker cord through there, perhaps, because there's technically more open space. You'd have to kind of deform the paracord to do it, but I'm willing to bet you can get a slightly better size paracord on this. So, what is left to talk about on these? How about we look at the liners here? Very well skeletonized on the Sencut, on the Civivi, extremely skeletonized. The weights on these two knives. Now, admittedly, I did not think to check for the weight of the standard version of the Elementum, so I'm only going to be going off this carbon fiber version. 2.9 ounces versus 2.45 ounces for the Sencut Scepter. So this is a lighter knife, and it definitely does feel it in hand. This feels light. This feels like a feather. So it definitely is the less noticeable knife. They are both liner lock designs. I forgot to mention that. We can see the engagement definitely earlier on the Elementum, which means it's going to wear better over time. But we still have a nice early engagement on this one as well. Both are well jimped, and they are both easy to disengage and comfortable to disengage. So, honestly, about the same on lock. Probably a slightly better locking lineup on the Elementum. Pocket clips. Let's go ahead and bring in the old signature pocket that I stole the idea from Cutlery Lover and compare these two. They're essentially the same clip, this loop-over deep carry clip, which is so prevalent these days. I've long said that I've never been a fan of this clip design, but so many people like it. And we can see how they ride. They both vary pretty much absolutely, although technically if you want to split hairs, a tiny bit of the Civivi is exposed. So if you really wanted to nitpick, you could give a point to Sencut here for deeper carry. Honestly, though, I don't see much point. You really are splitting hairs at that point. Now, one thing I'll say about the clips, very strong and stout on the Sencut, slightly weaker on the Civivi. Not weak by any means, but weaker than the Sencut. So this has the stouter clip. And it has a clip that can be positioned for left-hand carry. You just back this screw out, take this pocket clip off, and reverse it, and then put that screw on the other side, and boom, left-hand carry. You cannot do that on the Civivi. So, worth noting that the Sencut is more ambidextrous than the Civivi is. Final thing to bring up, as far as I'm concerned, is the price point on both of these knives. Now, the Sencut Scepter will run you about $38, pretty much no matter which version you get, while the Civivi Elementum's base version runs you about $50, this Damascus version about $90, and then the shredded carbon fiber Damascus version's about $100 to $110. So the price difference between this and the standard version of this is only about $12. And whether or not $12 is a big difference to you or not really comes down to what your budget is. I started this channel reviewing really budget knives, and to this day I still review a lot of super cheap knives. I have a whole series about it. Hell, I have an Ozark Trail from Walmart that I got for $6 that I plan to do a full tabletop review on. So that $12 could be a big deal for you. Maybe you have a tighter budget, maybe finances are just rough at the moment due to the whole situation going on in the world. Maybe you're a younger kid and you only have a certain amount of money to spend from your allowance. That $12 could be a make it or break it situation. If you have the full $50 to spend, then decisions have to be made. Do you want the more stainless, easier to sharpen 9CR 18 blade of the Sencut, or do you want the longer lasting edge on a D2 Elementum, or a Damascus Elementum for that matter? However, with the D2 version, it will require more maintenance to keep rust free, and it's also going to be a little harder to sharpen. Do you like the narrower handle design of this or the broader handle design of this? Do you like having access to thumb studs? If you do, you need this version. You can't really put thumb studs on an Elementum. Are you a lefty? In which case, the Sencut will be the more lefty-friendly knife for you. There's really a lot of things that it factor into. I love both of these knives basically equally. I could not pick a winner if I had to. I think they're both amazing values, and if you have the money to buy both, I recommend that you buy both, but if you don't, I hope this video helped you decide which one is the better bang for your hard-earned buck. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, peace, and I will see you later.